The name of this lesson is The Introduction to Integers. The objective is to use integers in practical real world situations. Um, I do not have rights to this song, and so therefore I will be placing this link in the description for you to listen to at your convenience. But number rocks, rocks. Okay, so there are four different scenarios in which integers are used in mathematics. That is the use of negative and positive whole numbers. So altitude is the first one in which we look at. The highest point on record right now is Mount Everest. It is 29,035 feet above sea level. Sea level would represent zero. Anything that is above zero is going to have a sign of positive. If it is below sea level, then the sign is going to be negative. The lowest point on solid ground would be if you ever would go to the Dead Sea. It's actually 1,349 feet below sea level. So if you have a positive elevation, it's above water. Oh, I shouldn't say above water, above sea level. And if you have a negative elevation, then you are below sea level. We want to look at water and the states of water. First of all, at room temperature, water is going to be in a liquid state. If you look at the molecules that are indicated, um, the molecules are hardly touching each other. If you were to take the temperature of the water and drop the temperature, it's going to change from a liquid state into a solid state. As you look, the molecules are packed very tightly. The solid water is known as ice. Of course, if you have liquid water, it will freeze at 0 degrees Celsius. It will freeze at 0 degrees Celsius. Now, if you have solid water, which is ice, and you want to do the reverse process, it's going to melt at 0 degrees Celsius. So it depends on what state you are, whether the temperature is going up or going down. But it's either going to freeze if it's the temperature is dropping, or it's going to melt if the temperature is rising. Then, of course, water can be found also in the gaseous state. Look at the molecules, they don't touch at all. So, of course, the temperature of the water, if it continues to rise and it gets to 100 degrees Celsius, it's going to evaporate and go from a liquid state into a vapor or a gas. Of course, when these water molecules accumulate, as you saw previously, they have the depiction of a cloud that's liquid, not liquid water, gaseous water. And when those clouds, of course, become very heavy, it's going to burst and into rain, and it goes back from a gas to a liquid. This is the process known as condensation. Of course, I don't think they call rain condensation, but if you ever take something out of the refrigerator, there's a lot of water vapor that is in the air. Once it touches the cold glass or the cold can, you'll see water vapors, not water vapor, water droplets being formed on the outside of the container. That water is not coming from inside of the container, it's coming from the water vapors that are in the air, because that gaseous water touches something below 100 degrees and it changes from a gas to back to a liquid. So these are the three different states of matter. Now, the third one is known as money. So if you own money, then you have the luxury of putting a plus sign in front of your net worth. If you owe money, you have the distinct pleasure of putting a negative sign in front of your net worth. In fact, most people that you know have a negative net worth because they owe more than they own. All right, time. There's a countdown here going on. So you normally hear them say T minus 10, 9, 8, 7. You're counting down. So as you're counting down to an event, it's a minus sign. Right now, we are counting down to Christmas. And so we have, today is October the 28th. So we have about 2 months before we get to Christmas. 8 weeks in total, I suppose. Next week, this time it'll be down to 7, and then 6. And as you count down, we have a negative value as you count down to an event. So you could say minus 8 weeks to Christmas if you wanted to do so. Then, of course, if you're counting up, the most notable event we use to count up is the day we were born. And then 1 year after you were delivered into the world, then they give you a title of being 1 year after that. Of course, there's cake and ice cream that you will never remember happening. But these are the different ways in which we have integers. So, of course, the reference points are sea level, money, there's nothing, temperature, freezing or 0, and time is when the event happens. So we use negative if you are below sea level, if you owe money, if the temperature is below 0, or if it is before an event. We use a positive value or a positive sign if we are above sea level, if we own money, if the temperature is above 0, and if it's after an event.